Welcome back, Dragon Brood. Have an updated deck for you this time. People seem to be enjoying when I do these updates to decks that people already like. We saw a lot of big, I guess, high number of views on the Gruul deck that we just updated, and the next most popular deck that people said anything about has been the Rakdos build. So I updated that one. So played through a little bit on stream this week, made some changes, and actually had some pretty good success with it. So I want to share it with everybody. Now, getting into the Rakdos build, a lot of it's going to look similar, actually, and that's the whole point of an update. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We want to just keep it fresh, keep it competitive against the stuff that we're starting to see more of, which in this case is a lot of mono red and blue-white and blue-white-green control decks. So these changes were made with that stuff in mind. Now, starting from the top, we are still playing Fervent Champion. Card's still good, one of the better one drops, and having the ability to pump your other knights, which we still have several in the deck, seems pretty dang good. Knight of the Ebon Legion, no complaints about this card at all. It's one of the better one drops you can play in any type of aggressive deck if you have access to black. So you kind of got to still play it. You also put your opponent in some bad situations late in games with just this card existing. It's also one of your few ways that if you've done a lot of early damage, your opponent can end up with like a Dream Trawler that if they have to block this, you can potentially even survive the Dream Trawler combat, which is very cool. Now here's one of the updated cards we added to this list. Dreadhorde Butcher. And the truth is, I have a love-hate relationship with the Dreadhorde Butcher myself, but in this deck, it's really good. On the turns where you say are on the play and your opponent doesn't have a block or anything out, then you can lead with the Dreadhorde Butcher instead of playing your Stormfist Crusader. But if they do have something, you play the Crusader. Then when you play the Butcher, get in a big attack the next turn. Now your opponent's kind of put in an awkward situation because you have your 1-mana creature, your Crusader, then your Butcher, and it's kind of what do they want to do with it. Butcher also works with some other cards that we've added here as part of the change as well. Still rocking the Blacklands Paragon. And it's interesting because this card is okay against the red decks. I won't say it's really good, but sometimes it is. It also gives you a little bit of extra play against the Fires of Invention decks that we still run into sometimes. I also don't mind it against control strategies, where you're kind of waiting for them to play a Shadow the Sky. You don't want to put more than 3 creatures out. So you let them take their turn, you leave mana up. They sweep the board, or Ritualist Set maybe. And then during their end step, you play it, and then you still have at least 3 damage coming through the next turn. And because this deck has some haste creatures, it has some extra small creatures you can play, it's possible you play something the next turn and you're still attacking for 4 or 5 damage, which is really, really nice. Don't always worry about getting the extra death touch and lifelink, whatever. That is its purpose in some matchups. Other times it's just having a flash creature that can really get in on your opponent. Stormfist Crusader, still a quality card, still good. It's almost the glue that holds this type of deck together, if I'm being honest. It's one of the few ways you can get extra cards in your hand, and it just does incremental damage over the course of the game. Like, sometimes it can be a little tough when you know you're giving your opponent a card, but you're really hoping to get more out of that than your opponent is. Judith the Scourge Diva. This is the other card we added to the deck. And again, like I was saying earlier, it works well with Dreadhorde Butcher, giving it an additional point of damage. So Dreadhorde Butcher by itself with the Judith the next turn can take down a 4 toughness creature, which is nice. Sometimes it even just takes down 2 creatures, where the one that blocks it dies and then it's sacrificed and the next thing it can deal damage. And it's interesting because you get multiple triggers. You'll get the Dreadhorde Butcher trigger when it dies, but you also get the trigger off the Judith. So sometimes just swinging your Dreadhorde Butcher into a combat can kill 2 or 3 things, and that's super nice. Or even split it and target 2 different Planeswalkers. Sometimes that's a thing you can do. It's also good being able to pump up a Stormfist Crusader that's already hard to block, so it's getting additional point. It gives a point to Fervent Champion that already has First Strike. So it's giving you a few extra bits of damage here from a couple different angles that you didn't have before. And then if your opponent sweeps the board, great. You're going to deal an extra 3 damage at a minimum. So I'm really liking it in this spot. And there were some other cards we were playing before that over time have become a little less useful, and this gives us a good spot to fill that with. Then there's Bone Crusher Giant. And this one's been a little tough because it's great in the red matchups. It kills the majority of their creatures. It's a big body for them to deal with. But against the control matchups, it's not quite as good. So you're in this weird kind of spot with it because you sideboard it out sometimes where it just doesn't do much. But then there's matchups where you absolutely want it. So we're still playing it main deck for now because I feel like it's one of those cards that if it's not main deck, you might as well just not play it. But who knows? Like, if you find something else, I'd love to see in the comments. Speaking of, if you like this type of stuff, please, please, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And if nothing else, leave a comment and let me know, because I really do want to know if there's another card you think you should be playing here other than the Stormfist Giant, or Bonecrusher Giant. I mixed up two cards there. But other than the Bonecrusher Giant, what else would you play? Because I'm sure there's something else I haven't thought of yet, and I would love to try out some new stuff. Still playing 2 Murderous Riders in this list. I don't know if it's necessarily better than a lot of other things, but it is pretty versatile. And I will say on both the Bonecrusher Giant and the Murderous Rider, don't get caught up trying to get to play both sides. Sometimes it's just not worth it to play the adventure and the creature. Sometimes, say against the red matchup, I just want to play the Murderous Rider as a 2/3 lifelinker. That's it. Just straight up give them something hard to remove. If they don't, I'm getting to gain life. That's good enough. Against some decks, it's just you're trying to apply pressure the right way. So sometimes I'm just going to play my 4/3, knowing I want to follow up with some stuff the next turn. You know, you just have to sequence your cards right. More often than not, you're going to want to play both sides, but not always. Really think about that. We're still rocking the Rotting Regisaur because the guy is huge and he carries a big stick, technically, whenever you play Embercleave. But even when not, this is the best card you're going to play as far as putting pressure on your opponent. So go for it. We did make a change. We've been debating what we wanted our 4-drop slot to be at different times. It's been Nightmare Shepherd. It's been Spawn of Mayhem. Now we're on Rankle. I don't like it so much against the red decks, so in those matchups, I'm generally sideboarding it out. But against everything else, Rankle's actually okay. One, it flies, so that's really cool. It has haste, which is nice. But sometimes even just getting that extra point of damage or getting an opponent to discard a card can be huge and really do what you want it to do. Sideboard. Well, actually, we'll get there in a second. Forgot. We have lands to deal with first. The lands, nothing real special here except for the fact that we have cut down to just 1 Castle Locthwain. And a lot of our matchups, we really just weren't using it, even when we drew it. But those matches that go really long, sometimes you're happy to draw it. As a matter of fact, I won a game on stream the other night specifically because I had Castle Locthwain and was able to draw 3 cards over the course of the game. Even doing, I think, 7-9 damage to myself with it, and that was fine. But it still did what we wanted to, got us to the cards we needed, and really helped us push through in those games. We're still playing 2 Temple of Malice. I don't love it, but we have enough things that we can play on turn 2 that if we miss the opportunity to play a 1-drop then followed by a 2, seems totally okay for us. Now to that sideboard that I was trying to get to. So eagerly, 2 red cap melees, which it's just good against the red decks, great against mono red, but also works against anything else, other Rakdos decks, Gruul decks, whatever. Quality card, no reason not to play it. Shadow Spears, we're bringing in against the red decks. However, there's been once or twice I've seen these blue-white Thassa decks running around, and this does give you the ability to remove the indestructibility from Thassa to be able to kill it. So not often, but if your opponent is playing any of the Theros gods that you have trouble killing, this gives you that opportunity. So you can use it that way too. Something not to overlook. Grafdigger's Cage, we're using this against Uros, against Kroxas, against Phoenixes, again, but mostly the real reason it's there is against the food decks. Those are just becoming so ubiquitous. We're seeing so many of them again that it's just worth it. It keeps them from getting the cats out of the yard, from getting the woe bringers back, and it's just an all-around good thing to have. Agonizing Remorse, it's a card against the control decks. However, again, if you're playing against Kroxas, if you're playing against Uros, it's another thing you can remove from the graveyard. Totally good there. Epic Downfalls, we're using both against the mono red decks to be able to remove Torbrand, to remove an axe, but we're just using it to other big creatures, other obvious spots where you would want it. Not a big surprise. Noxious Grass, believe it or not, this is becoming the card that's probably the least useful out of the sideboard. We seem to be able to handle most of the green matchups okay, but I have used it a couple times to still get rid of a Nissa or whatever, so I guess it's still earning its keep, so to speak. But if something were to get replaced in the sideboard, it actually might be Noxious Grasp. I know that's weird to say, but that might just be where we are right now. I don't know. And then topping things off, 2 Bedevils. And I have at times brought this in against the red decks just to have more removal to keep their creatures down. I've used it against multiple control decks that are doubling down on the Planeswalkers. I've used it in opposing creature decks for various reasons, so the card's kind of flexible, pretty good. I do bring it in against the food decks as a way to kill their big dragon. It kills Mayhem Devil. It actually lets you also kill their Witch's Oven if you don't have another way to get rid of it. So there's a few things there to mess around with. One thing I would say overall, if I was about strategy and cards, a lot of your stuff is susceptible to Ritual Assault, which is a problem. But you can usually work around that, and that's okay. Judith gives you a little extra flexibility, being able to do extra damage, so that's not bad. There are some situations you do have to worry about people playing Claim the Firstborn. That comes up in those sacrifice decks a bit, so that's something to think about. You want to focus on killing your opponent's sacrifice outlets, so that way the card doesn't particularly wreck you when it comes up. And the only other thing I would add is I've been trying Angrass Rampage in this list, and it turns out I didn't like it all that much. I usually wasn't killing the things I wanted to. The only spots I probably really would like it still are probably against the control decks, mostly because you can kill a Planeswalker that you want, or a lot of times the only creature they have out is a Dream Trawler, and you can get rid of a Dream Trawler. But other than those cases, I probably wouldn't worry about it. So if you're coming up to those situations a lot, maybe swap out 2 Bedevils for 2 Angrass Rampage in the sideboard. But that, or actually maybe even get rid of those Noxious Grass we talked about. That's probably the only thing I would switch right now. But again, leave a comment. If you all have any feelings about this, or you have better cards you would play, definitely let me know about them. I would love to try them out and let you know how they go. And again, please like this video if you like this type of content. If you want more deck techs, I would love to do them. And otherwise, just subscribe to the channel so you know when I'm putting stuff up and you can come back and check it out. But that's it. That's all I have right now. Till next time, thanks for hanging out.